Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and it's Friday, so a good time to check in with RCP's own Charlie Tidmarsh. Charlie writes a regular column for RCP called This Week in Censorship, where he keeps a close eye on the relationship between government and the press. So, Charlie, welcome back to the program.
Great to be back. Thank you.
So we've talked before about the Global Engagement Center at the State Department. It was set up with the mission of fighting disinformation, but it's now officially being shut down. What happened?
Yeah, so we spoke last time I was on. I think there's been some speculation since the election about the fate of the Global Engagement Center, which is sort of an agency within the State Department. It's been around for about 8 years. It was launched in 2016. And, you know, we were, when I was last on, we were wondering, speculating that it might lose its extension. It had an 8-year charter and that was obviously up for renewal this year. And yeah, we've just got confirmation this week that, you know, its extension would have been written into the National Defense Authorization Act for 2025, and it will no longer continue on into the second Trump term. So it's quite interesting. You know, the State Department officially confirmed that earlier this week, and they've confirmed that some of the personnel and resources will be sort of reassigned to other bureaus in the federal government that monitor foreign intelligence operations. But, you know, as you know, and as we've talked about, the Global Engagement Center is a sort of a lightning rod for a lot of people in the last couple of years concerned with domestic activities of censorship.
Yeah, tell us about that. Where did it go astray in your view?
Yeah, well, you know, I think the Global Engagement Center was founded and launched with a mandate, as you said, to monitor foreign influence and intelligence operations, propaganda operations in Asia and Russia and China. And that was, you know, a pretty uncontroversial and supported bipartisan effort. But it's gone astray in the last couple of years, in part to some fantastic reporting by a collection of different reporters who were suspicious of how the Global Engagement Center has turned its attention to domestic actors, journalists, and even congresspeople. And, you know, I think the most significant finding in recent years was that the Global Engagement Center has funded, in significant part, a British nonprofit, or I guess you could call it an NGO, called the Global Disinformation Index, which has come up many times as I've been here with you. Yeah. Which is essentially it's a nonprofit committed to, you know, people use different words for this. Conservatives like to say blacklisting, you know, other people like to say media monitoring, but it's a media monitoring tool that supplies advertising companies and brokerages with lists. They call them dynamic exclusion lists of outlets online that might be compromised by misinformation or even foreign influence and foreign propaganda, so that advertisers can sort of consciously steer their money away from those websites and stifle them and sort of suffocate them out of significant revenue. So that is uncontroversial now. We know that that's how the GDI operates, and we also know that the Global Engagement Center, which is an organ of the State Department, funded this work. And we know that the GDI, the Global Disinformation Index, lists dozens of American media properties as being compromised by either foreign influence or just mis or disinformation, and you know, systematically tries to strip them of their advertising revenue.
Yeah, so and these tend to be, of course, on the right, or
absolutely,
right,
yes.
Right? I mean, that's basically the argument. So, you know, the State Department said, as you mentioned, that it plans to move the center's staff and funding to other bureaus aimed at fighting foreign disinformation. So is this really a victory for those who oppose the center, or is it just part of the Washington shell game where the personnel remain in place, the function continues, even if the center itself has ceased to exist?
It's a really good question. It's something I certainly have been thinking a lot about, and it's something that we touched on last time I was on the show, because, you know, I came on, I think just days after Marco Rubio got the Secretary of State nomination, and the question is, you know, the question for me was is someone who, at least historically, is sort of hawkish on foreign policy and certainly certainly in China and China's foreign influence operations, going to be comfortable with completely shuttering on some accounts, a historically quite successful and functional agency when it comes to foreign intelligence operations. So I don't know yet. I hope, and I think most people hope that these resources can be sort of adequately sort of diverted into the original founding mission of the Global Engagement Center, which is to counter foreign influence. And it remains to be seen. But the problem with with the foreign influence sort of mission statement is that it was very insidiously manipulated when certain personnel at these agencies decided to focus their attention on domestic actors, right? Because what ended up happening is, like, Congress people like Jim Banks and even journalists like Matt Taibbi and Gabe Kaminsky did a lot of work on this, where when they were suspected of peddling disinformation, the State Department was able to label them as in internal memos as potentially being conduits of Russian influence. And just by doing that, almost essentially without any evidence at all, they're able to remain within their mandate of countering foreign influence. But in almost every case, that those allegations have been false, and so you're right. It's a very good question. We have to keep paying attention to it.
Yeah.